For most people, the primary joy in life is the act of creation, making something good and useful, whether it's dinner for your family or a deck off the back of your house or a solid day at work. The most profound act of creation, of course, is having children, new life itself. Healthy societies celebrate all of this. They understand that the impulse to create is how civilizations are built. But they also recognize that there are forces arrayed against creation, and they vigilantly defend themselves against those. In every society, there are those who seek to destroy. They destroy for the same reason that troubled boys torture dogs or shoot house cats. Inflicting pain makes them feel powerful. We used to call people like that antisocial forces. They still exist, we just pretend they don't. Or worse, we excuse their behavior. We coddle them, we fund them. Wall Street sends the money in the hope that they will be destroyed last. The rest of us just look on confused. We don't really know what's happening. But the destroyers know. They know exactly what's going on.
The mainstream media, the enemies of the Republic. They don't want peace, they want chaos. They don't want unity, they want a race war. This is the NFAC militia, not effing around coalition, NFAC, in Stone Mountain, Georgia, actively seeking conflict with peaceful local militia.
I don't see no white militia. So to the boogie boys, the 3%ers, and all the rest of you scared-ass rednecks, we here. Where the fuck you at? We in your house. Let's go. NFAC, motherfucker.
Who is funding this, and why is the mainstream media ignoring these provocations for violence, and quite literally, agitation for a race war?
What are you? I just told you what I was. What are you? What are you is the question. Everywhere you go, you invade, steal, rape, harm, and kill us. Oh, really? Then you steal people's culture, then you have the nerve to have an attitude about it. Where's our reparations? Thank you. Of course. Well, I like the song. What did I do to you? It's not what you did. What the ancestors did. You benefit from it. Go ahead, that white denial tip before you lose your life. Fuck out my face.
As I wrote on Twitter, just imagine the mainstream media's reaction if this was all-white militia intimidating and threatening black motorists. It would be breaking front-page news from now until November. But in this case, nothing but crickets from the mockingbirds.
Never in American history have they been more emboldened than they are now. Just this afternoon around lunchtime, an activist called Sean King issued the following demand on Twitter, quote, "All murals and stained glass windows of white Jesus and his European mother and their white friends should also come down. They are a gross form of white supremacy, created as tools of oppression, racist propaganda. They should all come down." End quote. Before you dismiss that idea as absurd, the rantings of some crank on social media, keep in mind that Sean King is the most famous Black Lives Matter leader in this country. Black Lives Matter is now more popular than either major political party. So don't be surprised when they come for your church. Why wouldn't they? No one is stopping them. The forces of destruction have grand ambitions. It's not just about the Teddy Roosevelt statue. They plan to rule this country. What will happen if they do?
The situation is far more complicated than they make it out to seem. So many people have asked me, why is this happening? How is it possible that one incident in Minneapolis can cause rioting all across the world? We're seeing riots in France, we're seeing riots in England, we're seeing riots all across Europe, and of course, all throughout the United States. So what is the reason for this? Well, before we get into this interview from 1984, I'm going to leave you with some words from Malcolm X. This was recorded in 1963.
The white liberal differs from the white conservative only in one way. The liberal is more deceitful, more hypocritical than the conservative. Both want power, but the white liberal is the one who has perfected the art of posing as the Negro's friend and benefactor. And by winning the friendship and support of the Negro, the white liberal is able to use the Negro as a pawn or a weapon in this political football game that is constantly raging between the white liberals and the white conservatives. The American Negro is nothing but a political football, and the white liberals control this ball through tricks or tokenism, false promises of integration and civil rights. In this game of deceiving and using the American Negro, the white liberals have complete cooperation of the Negro civil rights leader who sell our people out for a few crumbs of token recognition, token gains, token progress.
Hello, everyone, on this day of prayer, where we try to understand God's plan in our pain. To George's family and friends, Jill and I know the deep hole in your hearts when you bury a piece of your soul deep in this earth. I know you have a lot of questions, honey. No child should have to ask questions that too many black children have had to ask for generations.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Wealthy kids, black kids, Asian kids. He's going to let the big banks once again write their own rules. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains. I've had a great relationship. In Delaware, the largest growth in population is Indian Americans moving from India. You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
A few foolish souls will attempt to point out the obvious, what's true. Of course there are racists here, as there are everywhere. But overall, this is the least racist country in the history of the world. Millions of Africans want to move here. Many already have. Our last president was black. What are you talking about? Those people will be silenced. Anyone who defies the narrative will be silenced. By that point, the category of hate speech will have expanded to include anything they don't want to hear, and it will be criminalized.
In a public demonstration to show that administrators will absolutely not be diverted or persuaded by facts or reason, nor will they allow themselves to be challenged by free speech discourse, the Vice President of Research and Innovation at Michigan State University, physicist Stephen Hsu, has been forced out of his position at the university after daring to show actual facts from a 2019 study that shows there to be no racial bias in incidents of police shootings.
You don't want to live in a place like that. Who can save us from that?
So the race issue was pumped by the elite. They told black people statues celebrate slavery, and they told white people immigrants want to tear up national history. There was a clever distraction from fake Rona. These mini Psy-Ops are all over the show, really. But the whole world's falling for it. I mean, Mercedes changed their Formula One race cars to black for the coming season for BLM. All football shirts in England changed their names on the back to BLM. And all white soccer people, managers, coaches, players, had to bend the knee. At one game in North England, someone flew a White Lives Matter banner overhead, and everybody was outraged. They found the dude, and this is probably a fake AI of a non-person, and made sure he can't afford to live or eat. Which here is the odd one out?
Kind of a testimony
So
to
the
what we've been
protests
saying
continued.
all along here.
Now, what
that
movement
it
do you
doesn't
think,
appear to
if
be
you had to
so
guess,
much a racial
smashes
problem
up its own
as
community
an
and own local
problem.
businesses? Now, these scenes of dystopia are nothing compared to what you will see next year. Really, this is nothing.
Oh, hell no. They're beating her up.
Suburban commandos could be the norm soon. Just wanted to grill. Did you see in one county people without white skin don't need to wear a mask?
This is Yusra Kogali. She's one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter in Toronto. One day, back in February 9th of 2016, she tweeted, "Please Allah give me strength to not cuss. Kill these men and white folks out here today. Please, please, please." This is the kind of ideology and mentality that you see in the leadership of Black Lives Matter.
See, Jesus makes this clear in Luke chapter 18, verse 9. And as we broach this subject, you know, it's just tough because it's so slippery. It's something that again, it's hard for you to gauge yourself. And it's rare that you find someone in your life that will be honest enough to tell you these things. But in Luke chapter 18, verse 9, it says this. It says, to some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everybody else, Jesus told this parable. He said, two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood up and prayed about himself. God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He wouldn't even look up to heaven, but he beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you, this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. The scriptures explain why Jesus told this parable. It was spoken to those who were confident of their own righteousness.
Here's a few facts. Slavery in Libya goes on now, not from white people. Black on black slavery was common in Africa for thousands of years. Many black people had slaves in America. In 1830, there were near 4,000 free black people who owned around 13,000 black slaves. Also, Native American Indians had thousands of black slaves. And this sort of anti-North European white man is an agenda, and 99% of people are lapping it up.
The center of plantation country, the wealthiest area of South Carolina. He changed his name. April was now known as William Ellison, the name of his former white owner. His gin business prospered. He bought this home, hundreds of acres of land, and eventually 68 slaves to work that land. Granger McCoy now lives in the Ellison home and says he often finds old cotton gin blades.
What do the Ellisons say when they come?
They're looking for the home place.
All descendants of what many of us thought an impossible oxymoron, a black slave owner.
I had a black ophthalmologist come through here, Ellison, and we sat on this couch right here. And his great-great-granddaddy owned 68 slaves, and here I am, white, over here, and my great-great-granddaddy didn't own any slaves. And it was like somebody blew a dog whistle in a kennel. Everybody was just kind of turning their head, not knowing how to handle all this.
The book Black Masters chronicles Ellison's life in the antebellum South and suggests that his slaves were the worst fed and clothed of any in Stateburg. It also suggests that Ellison was a slave breeder, selling off infant girls, a practice even some white owners found cruel. Whatever the case, Ellison certainly had a good relationship with other white aristocracy. This contract shows that Ellison didn't just buy a home in wealthy Stateburg, he bought it directly from former Governor Stephen Miller, a governor and former slave trading property. He was the wealthiest black man in South Carolina, the fourth wealthiest in the South, wealthier than more than 90% of whites. Just a few hundred yards from the Ellison home is the Ellison graveyard, private, neither mixed with other white nor black tombstones, symbolic of his unusual position in the pre-war South, a position so few of us even knew existed.
Whatever happened during Reconstruction, and then up through the Jim Crow era, anything and everything that had to deal with the relationships between the blacks and the whites just went underground.
I was going to cover all the mass stabbings of white people in the UK last week in Glasgow, Reading and Bournemouth. I think there's a mind control, possible hoaxes to fuel race hatred. I was going to cover the riots by people of colour in Stuttgart, but I think you'll get the picture and agenda. Bill Gates' wife said, after health workers, people of colour should get vaccinated first. With Mrs. Gatesy boy, I just get a scary Poppins vibe from her. Spoonful of propaganda makes the poison go down, the poison go down, the poison. Last week in Chicago, over 10 black-on-black murders. A 1-year-old and a 13-year-old both got caught in the crossfire. Any protests? No. Armed guard arrive? No. Antifa were there helping people? No. They even went a step further, and now the big movement of Black Trans Lives Matter. This is all a diversion to polarize you so they can control you. And people continue to be far, far, far from reality.
Children here. You find that African American person and you give them $10. Cash App, Venmo, $10 in your pocket. That's my challenge to you. Do it.
Black Lives Matter. It's time we rise up and demand justice.
Right now.
We must do the work required to dismantle cisgendered privilege.
Those heterosexual.
Those straight people.
We must defund the police, and our white allies will lobby Congress to disarm every American, so we are no longer shot by the police. And once we remove every Confederate statue and piece of history we don't like, all white people must kill themselves.
I was not expecting that.
Yeah. Their whiteness makes them the cornerstone of systematic racism. So we ask all white allies to use your privilege and sacrifice yourself for the greater good.
No. I like white people. They got the best customer service.
Then we take over city blocks and declare them communist utopias.
What does that have to do with black people?
Everyone works for the government. Everyone pays a carbon tax. Absolutely no borders. No private property. Yes. Joseph Stalin. Yes. Lenin. Marxism.
COVID-19 crisis has shown us that our old systems are not fit anymore for the 21st century. But to shape the system for the need for the post-corona era, we have a choice: to remain passive, which would lead to the amplification of many of the trends we see today: polarization, nationalism, racism, and ultimately increased social unrest and conflicts. But we have another choice. We can build a new social contract, particularly integrating the next generation. We can change our behavior to be in harmony with nature again. And we can make sure that the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution are best utilized to provide us with better lives. In short, we need a great reset. We must not miss this unique window of opportunity.
And so here we are, celebrating the birth of a nation, independence for white men, at a site described by one Native American activist as, quote, a symbol of white supremacy.
Wow. Look, it sounds ridiculous because it is. And there is more.
You know, folks are going to turn up, and folks have been turning up, and that's not going to stop. And thank goodness, you know, looters got a bad name during the, George Floyd protests, but thank goodness for the looters, man. You have a place called Target. You have a store called Target. You're going to be a target.
Again, sounds hard to believe, doesn't it?
It's been desecrated by putting these slave-owning, racist, horrible, horrible white men in 60-foot statues on this wall.
What is the matter with you?
Well, you may imagine that self-defense is your bulwark against chaos. In this country, you assume you can always defend yourself and your family. That's a pillar of our civilization, of all Western civilizations. This woman assumed that too. On Wednesday, she was driving through Louisville, Kentucky. According to Louisville police, the woman found herself surrounded by protesters who were blocking the road. They stood in front of her car with a megaphone. She argued with them to let her pass. One of them produced a gun. The woman tried to flee. We're showing the dramatic tape on your screen right now. Look at it. When the woman stopped at a red light a block later, another protester pointed a gun at her again. She hit the gas and made it home alive. On Sunday, National Public Radio published an article about the incident. The headline of that piece, quote, "Vehicle attacks rise as extremists target protesters." In other words, for trying to escape from being murdered, NPR called this woman an extremist who was, quote, targeting protesters.
I'm going to have one specific group give you their outlook on what their group is all about, what their narrative is, what their agenda is, and what their trajectory is in their own words. Again, not my opinion, not conjecture. Now I'm going to let you hear Patrisse Cullors, who's also a co-founder of Black Lives Matter. Listen to what she says that she and all the leaders of Black Lives Matter are trained in.
I think that the criticism is helpful. I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists.
So she says they have an ideological frame and that they are trained Marxist. Not Americans, they're trained Marxists. We know something about American ideology. It's antithetical to Marxism.
We are...
We'll let you hear that again.
Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
So they're versed in Marxist ideologies. And that is Patrisse Cullors, who is the co-founder of Black Lives Matter. This right here, you're going to hear Hawk Newsome, who is the Black Lives Matter leader in the greater New York area.
We stand at a critical point in history. Give black people their rights, or we will burn this country to ashes.
So Hawk Newsome says, give black people their rights, or we will burn this country to ashes. Now, some would look at that, and the takeaway they get from this is that that's a terrorist threat. But this is on YouTube, and this was produced by Vice News, so they're obviously okay with this. They're okay with the terrorist threat. They're okay with somebody saying, if you don't give me what I want, I'm going to burn this country to ashes. YouTube's okay with this. Facebook's okay with this. Twitter's okay with this. All of social media and mainstream media is okay with this because they keep championing the cause of Black Lives Matter, which means they champion the cause of Black Lives Matter ideology because nobody's calling this out. And again, this isn't conjecture. This isn't my opinion about this group. Now, I want to end with this. This is Yusra again, in her own words, in a post on Facebook. Whiteness is not humanness. And notice the A's missing. She doesn't want to say the word man because this person is decidedly, in her own words, against man and against white people. Whiteness is not humanness. In fact, white skin is subhuman. Let me just stop there. What if you said that about somebody of a different color skin than white? What would you be called? If you called... Matter of fact, I think this is part of YouTube's terms and conditions. You shouldn't call people subhuman. You shouldn't call people animals. And I agree. I agree with YouTube on that. You shouldn't be doing that. It's not humane to do that. It's not humane to call another human subhuman. Whiteness is not humanness. In fact, white skin is subhuman. All phenotypes exist within the black family, and white people are a genetic defect of blackness. White people have a higher concentration of enzyme inhibitors that suppress melanin production. They are genetically deficient because melanin is present at the inception of life. Melanin is directly linked to fertility and the human reproductive system. Notice there's no A in human because, again, USERA is against men. Melanin is directly linked to strong bones. Melanin is directly linked to the strength of the nervous system. Melanin is directly linked to the strength of senses such as vision and hearing. Melanin is directly linked to the strength of neurosystems affecting capacities like intelligence, memory, and creativity. Melanin enables black skin to capture light and hold it in its memory mode, which reveals that blackness converts light into knowledge. Melanin directly communicates with cosmic energy. That is why the indigeneity of all humanity comes from blackness. We are the first and strongest of all humans, and our genetics are the foundation of all humanity. Melanin is essential for the efficient performance of all the body natural functions. Therefore, white people are recessive genetic defects. That is factual. White people are recessive genetic defects. White people need white supremacy as a mechanism to protect their survival as a people because all they can do is produce themselves. Black people, simply through their dominant genes, can literally wipe out the white race if we had the power to. It is why white supremacy as an imperial system thrives. It tries to control, suppress, and destroy our existence in blackness because we're a threat to the genetic annihilation of white people. Do you ever wonder how black people, after centuries of colonial violence, genocide, and destruction, no matter what systems created to make us extinct, how we keep coming back? It is because we are superhumans. White people have a genetic defect, but according to USERA, black people are superhumans. I bet most people who march in the Black Lives Matter movement don't know this about their leaders. Again, none of this was my opinion. None of this was conjecture. Everything in this video was taken straight from the leadership of Black Lives Matter.
This is not a momentary civil disturbance. This is a serious and highly organized political movement. It is not superficial. It is deep and profound. It has vast ambitions. Even now, so many of us continue to pretend that this is about police brutality. It's about the death of a man called George Floyd in Minneapolis. We still imagine we can fix it by regulating chokeholds or spending more on de-escalation training. We are too literal. We're too good-hearted to understand what's really happening. Our decency is the mob's main weapon against us. We have no idea who we're up against. This is an ideological movement.
We actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists.
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country.
The ideas that fuel it have incubated for decades on college campuses.
It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years. Actually, it's overfulfilled because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. Your leftists in United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned, when they see that Marxist-Leninists come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot. But they may turn into the most bitter enemies of Marxist-Leninists when they come to power. And that's what happened in Nicaragua. You remember most of these former Marxist-Leninists were either put to prison or one of them split, and now he's working against Sandinistas. It happened in Grenada when Maurice Bishop was already a Marxist. He was executed by a new Marxist who was more Marxist than this Marxist. Same happened in Afghanistan when first there was Taraki, he was killed by Amin, then Amin was killed by Babrak Karmal with the help of KGB. Same happened in Bangladesh when Mujibur Rahman, very pro-Soviet leftist, was assassinated by his own Marxist-Leninist military comrades. It's the same pattern everywhere. The time bomb is ticking. With every second, the disaster is coming closer and closer. Unlike myself, you will have nowhere to defect.
We need help, and we need it right now. These are not protests. This is a totalitarian political movement, and someone needs to save the country from it.
I can remember when I was a little girl. That was many years ago. Growing up in Brooklyn, New York, it didn't really matter about color at that time. I saw everything happy, full of love, not a negative, hateful perspective. And that was a lack of having a father in the household, which is very, very, very important. To have a father, someone to look up to, someone to make you feel safe and comfortable in your home and your surrounding. And brothers and sisters, I mean, we're lacking that so much in our families. And as I got older, and I looked around me and I looked at the world, and my God, it was a whole different world. A world from being 7 and 8 had turned into a nightmare. Yes, a nightmare. No father in the home. Poverty in the home. It was disarray. It was, how should I say it? I mean, without really breaking down on this, it was just horrible. How can you choose if there's one color? You need something to choose from to make life worthwhile. Simple. Not color, not race, not ethnic groups, whatever it is. You have an opportunity to enjoy or you have an opportunity to hate. It's all up to you. I just want you to think. If everything was one color, where would be the joy? Where would be the happiness? Where would be the choice? Where would be the design in life? Life wouldn't even have a design. Everything would just be one way. One color. The designer of this universe knew that, thought of that, saw that, and did something about it. I think a lot about Black Lives Matter. And I also think a lot about my white sisters and brothers, my Indian sisters and brothers, my Chinese sisters and brothers, my Mexican, Spanish sisters and brothers, my Italian sisters and brothers. Beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. And we need to stop fighting, stop killing, stop hating. Look at all of the negative energy that has such a great power in this world. Have you ever asked yourself why? Why? Such a beautiful world. Check out the mountains. Check out the blue sea. Just check out all of the beauty that nature has around you to enjoy. And tell me, why in the world are you fighting? Why are you hating? Why are you killing? What is your problem? Why can't you live and let me live? Why can't I live and let you live? This equation is so simple. It's really simple. But the simple things in life, we just can't seem to grasp it. Love. Love. Love one another as I have loved you. Love. That can change the world. That can really change the mentality of the world. I'm here to say with my wonderful son-in-law, Sam, I love him.
We love you, Mom.
Love you, Grandma.
Thank you. America's the greatest country in the world, and you would expect more out of greatness. This is what it's all about, love, and if we had more of that and less hate, then we can overcome racism. And as they get older, I just hope that they will live in a much better world than we did. We have to keep hope, and love give us hope. So to say to the world, to wrap it all up, It's a good feeling to love Sam. It's a wonderful feeling to love my grandchildren. And it's most of all, you know, there isn't any blockage there. It's just pure love. So there we are. LOVE. Thumbs up for love.